Hi, it's Tanya with Red Cardinal Crafts, and today I'm going to show you guys how to knit with circular needles. Now, I have a few different sizes of these, and they have different lengths. So you can do something large with these, like a baby blanket. Now, with regular knitting needles, I tend to buy like a 9-inch size because I find the longer ones are in your way and they're kind of hitting your arms and your legs and everything, and it's just kind of annoying. So, Phyllis, I just realized I'm using blue yarn. Anyway, inside joke between Miss Phyllis and I. Phyllis from Boston. All right, this is something I've been knitting, and it's a baby blanket that I have yet to give anybody. I've been working on this thing for like, I don't know, 8 years or so. But I'm using circular needles, and it's because that way I can make a really long blanket. And I think this pattern calls for like 150 stitches or something, or 120 stitches. So you need a lot of stitches. That amount is going to drive you crazy. This is my poor little pattern that's getting messed up. 175 stitches I needed for this. So that was not going to happen on a regular knitting needle. So let me show you how you would knit something. Now this is, I think, the shortest one I have, which is like 16 inches, and that's why in my video I showed you about knitting with double pointed needles. If you're doing something smaller, this doesn't make sense. It's too long. So let me cast on a whole lot of stitches on this, because this is why you would be using the circular needles, is because you're doing something that's pretty big. And you can just knit back and forth, like just pretend these are regular knitting needles and you would just go back and forth like the way I'm doing with the blanket. So I just knit along this side and then I flip it over and I knit my way back, and I'm just using this, but I'm knitting from either side. Like I'm knitting here and I'm keeping everything on that needle. With this one, we're actually going to join them, and then you're going to be knitting in the round, basically like you do with the double pointed needles, but they're on the circular ones. These are nice bamboo needles. The reason I have all these bamboo needles is because when we were living in Bermuda, like I got all these ones. I got a whole bunch of crochet hooks. There was a yarn store that was going out of business, and I ended up getting all these bamboo needles. They were so cheap. Oh my gosh. I want to say they were only like a few dollars for each pair, I think. And I got home and I was like, oh man, I should have got more. So I went back and everything was gone at that point. But yeah, haven't used most of them, but I just wanted to have them, and it was a sale and I couldn't resist. And like, this is just the coolest thing. Like, look at that. Isn't that neat? Like, and I could make like a giant blanket with that someday. Which, if we stay in our homes for much longer, I might end up doing that for something to do. Although, Lord knows I have a lot of crafts that are going to keep me busy for a while. So I'm just filling this with stitches so that it's just a little bit easier to show you. So you could do hats like this. I think you do. I've never made a hat with circular needles. I never made a hat. But if you did, I think when you get down to the end, there's only so small you can go with these. So then I think you do have to switch off to double pointed needles, just to get down to a smaller size. Okay, I'm going to put just a few more on here. And this color, if you're liking this blue, Phyllis, it's called Light Blue by Red Heart. Ah, Phyllis. She's fun. She's crazy, but she's fun. All right. Okay, so now, when you're knitting with circular needles, it's just as fiddly as when you first get started with double pointed needles. It's fiddly with any of it, even if you're just using regular knitting needles. Because see how twisted this gets? You want to have all your stitches going in the right direction. So I just refer to loops and bumps. I'm sure there's a more technical term for that, but just make sure all your loops are up and all your bumps are down, because if not, you're going to have a twisted mess. Okay? And I promise it gets easier. It's just the first couple rows are going to be a little screwed up. Okay, so see how I have mine now? I've got it. Here's the loops, and there's the bumps facing down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch hands. I've got my tail on my left side. Sorry, now all your bumps are facing up. I should have did that first. Okay. I'm not an expert knitter, I just know some basics, and I'm just trying to help you guys and give you something to do. Alright, so loops up, bumps down, nothing's twisted. Okay, so we have our tail on the left and our working yarn is on our right. We're going to, you can go just back and forth knitting if your working yarn, if it was like this, God, I'm gonna do it again. If your working yarn is on the right and you just knit back and forth, that's how I was doing that baby blanket. But for this, because we want to join them, you want to switch it in your hand. So tail is on your left, working yarn is on your right, and you're just going to knit like normal. So you're going to hold your tail out of the way, we're just going to knit like this, and this yarn coming from the right is going to lock this together. And just manage that tail for the first little while until we get going here, because it's going to cause some problems. And try to stay snug, if you know what I mean, with your knitting. Not tight, but just try to keep your needles kind of close together, just so you're not getting really big gaps, or any gaps actually, as you're doing this. Okay, and we're just going to keep going around, but see, that's basically locked in now. And you're just going to go around and around, and this is how you would do like a hat. And you can put a stitch marker. Let me see if I have one. Yes, I do. These ones I got years ago, and I really like them. There's the old kind, which I think I actually got rid of. Yeah, I got rid of them. And you can get stitch markers like this. So here are the stitch markers that I really like. Or this is a stitch counter. Did I call that a marker? You can get these ones. There's green and orange that come with the pack. I think they're clover, and it's basically like a little safety pin. So if you want to put that on your needle or on the stitch just to mark your first stitch, you just do like that. It's really cool. And then this is a little counter. So you can set it to 0, and then when I get around to my first row, there, I've done 1 row, 2 rows, and so on and so on. So you can use those. Whoa! I want you to see my dry hands from all my excessive hand washing. My hands are always dry to begin with, and now we're going to wash even more than normal. So just as you're going along, just kind of scooch everything up. Make sure your bumps are facing the bottom and your loops are on the top so nothing's twisted. Because you'd hate to get to the end of all this and have a twisted mess. Alright, so I'm almost done. I'm just coming around to the beginning. And as you work, this is going to get all sort of twisted and everything. Just try to keep it as straight as you can. And once you get knitting more, like the more you do, like my blanket, it's just going to get heavier and it'll just start to hang down. And it won't be it won't get twisty. But it's like every part of knitting, the first few rows are usually a bit of a mess. All right, so you see my stitch markers coming up, and that marks the beginning of the row. So we just go like that, and now we would go, so there's one row. I already twisted it for you. So that was, it was our first row that was on there, so then you just change your stitch, and that was row 1. And you just keep track of it like that because you're going in circles, and if you don't have anywhere to mark where you started, it can get very confusing, especially if you have to change your stitch or change something in the pattern. You want to know where you had first started. So you can just keep that on there. You can move it up, like to this next row that you're working on, so that's down there on that loop. So just move it up into the loop. And then it's right there, and you'll know when you get around to the other side. So there you go, and it's just going to be like regular knitting. It's actually going to look like it did with the double pointed needles. I still have that sample, so let me show you. So as you keep going, it's eventually just going to go looking like this. It's going to be like knitting and going around, but this is knitting with 4 needles going around in a circle instead of something like this. So you can see how the double pointed needles would work with something smaller, and then something like this would work with something bigger. All right, so I hope that helps you guys, and that is a little lesson on knitting with circular needles. Alrighty, so I hope you guys are good, and I'll be back with some more videos soon. All right, take care guys, see ya.